Hi, my name's Steven.
Hi, I'm April.
This is the 3 Pi Squared ABA Business Leaders podcast, where we discuss topics on how to create and grow an ethical and sustainable ABA practice.
Together, Steven and I owned a 7-figure ABA practice that provided both clinic and in-home services.
3 Pi Squared has helped over 900 ABA practices start up and expand with our comprehensive products and services geared specifically to ABA. Now, let's get to the podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to ABA Business Leaders Podcast, brought to you by 3 Pi Squared. I'm April.
Steven.
And today with us, we have very special guests. And I know I say this every week because I'm always excited about our guests, but these are extra special. We have Dan and Mike from ABA on Tap, some of our good buddies, and we've been on their podcast in the past. And so this time we're doing a special little deal where we're going to do a little podcast on, have a little conversation on our end, and then we're going to switch over and have a little conversation on their end and just see where this takes us today. So welcome, Dan and Mike.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to be back on with you all and on your podcast.
Yeah, it's good to see your faces. Good to hear your voices. It's been a little while for me. I know Dan's had a chance to meet with you here and there, and you've been so instrumental in helping us launch our current project, which I'm sure we'll talk about at length. But yeah, really good to see you guys. Thanks for having us on. Thanks for doing this pod swap. So we're excited to do this first hour and then switch over to our platform and capture another hour of exciting conversation.
Yeah, it's always fun. I know we had to stop talking to get record going because we were already getting into it. Well, where do we want to start? So do we just want to jump right in or? So, I have to remember too. When I turn to look at Steven, we're getting used to these new mics. I'm still learning here. So Dan and Mike, throughout our, friendship together, we met each other. How did we meet? Was it just we reach out about podcasting or?
I think so,
yeah.
We did.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And then we reach out to each other for a little support here and there. Just as we say in ABA Business Leaders, that's one thing that we really strive for is to be able to have a place for business leaders to collaborate and connect, because it can be really lonely as a business leader. Being in the podcast world and the ABA niche of it all can be a little strange sometimes too. So it's always great to have people to reach out to and chat with about that. So, but yeah, I guess I'll just jump right into this part. I mean, Dan and Mike, you guys have started an ABA company.
Oh,
Yes.
man. Yes.
So first of all, yes, we did meet. Y'all reached out and came on our podcast, but we just want to offer, honestly, a heartfelt thank you to you all, because like you said, we have started our own company, but a thank you from me personally on behalf of two pieces. One, we would not have been able to start our own company without you. Well, I can't imagine what it would look like without you and the platforms that you all offer. Even with the platforms, there were still a lot of questions. I can't imagine what it'd have been like. I would have just been spinning around with no direction or guidance. So thank you all for the ABA Business Leaders platform that you all have created. That is just, if you are starting an ABA company, I can't stress enough the importance of looking into that. That will be the single best investment that any of you all can make. So please look into that. And also, I think, speaking for myself, between that podcast and then also the conference that we all moderated together, it really kind of lit the fire with myself and ABA. I was really burnt out. That's why we were looking at starting our own company. With the ABA field as a whole, it just seemed so siloed and everybody was against each other, and it was just more hours and less clinical integrity. And having you all on the pod and then looking at the platforms that you offer allowed us to create our own company, but really bring the collaboration in ABA. And that's something that Mike and I just, after our first podcast, we just sat here and we're like, wow, it's amazing that people are still collaborating and trying to make the field better. So thank you both for those two things specifically. That just has made our lives overall just so much more fruitful. So thank you.
Well, Thank you. I'm blushing.
Thank you. Yeah.
No, you really are changing lives, honestly. Thank you.
It's such a
appreciate
big
that.
shift, I think. Speaking for myself and really just trying to focus on the clinical pieces, you start having to focus on other aspects of business startup and licenses and this permit or that permit and this policy and this other policy. And again, to echo what Dan said, you all just really spelled it out nicely. And more importantly, I'd say than the actual content, the idea that we could shoot you a quick email and you were always willing to point us in the right direction. And that's so important. I mean, there's so many questions that have to be answered. To have a platform to jump off of to start with is, I think, really, really helpful. Very time saving, makes it feel very real, like you're moving forward. And again, to echo what Dan said, I think it would have felt so much more painstaking without that initial assistance. Yeah, we can't thank you guys enough. And yes, we would recommend your products and your content to anybody out there who's interested in starting up. I think it's very informative to begin with, and just allows you to start engaging the powers that be and the systems that are out there, limiting the surprises. And even then, there's things that come up that, again, with a quick email to you guys, it was made much easier. So thank you.
Well, thank you again. So in this journey, I mean, you guys aren't new to ABA. You've been in the field for years, and you've worked in like leadership positions within other companies, correct?
Yeah.
Yep.
So what do you feel has been one of the biggest challenges in starting your own company, your own ABA agency specifically?
Yeah. So do you mind if I speak on that? Because I did a lot of the initial back end stuff. I think actually one of the gentlemen on one of the last podcasts had a good point of, ABA oftentimes is built from clinicians, but most of us don't have an MBA.
Yeah.
So we don't really understand that side of things. Credentialing with insurance kind of just seems like we're at their beck and call and not necessarily understanding what power we do and don't have. All of the handbooks and legal stuff, and we can talk about the handbooks that we've purchased from you all as well. That would have been in terms of the HIPAA handbook, like that's written in a way that I was like, wow, we need a emergency fire policy. Like what is that? Or we need all these sorts of levels of encryption. I know how to work with kids. I don't know how to meet California labor laws or federal labor laws. And make sure that we do so in a way that can maintain clinical integrity. So I'm not sure if that was too broad of an answer, but that's kind of, at the end of the day, all I want to do is get kids the therapy. And that is like 10, maybe 15% of starting a business in the beginning. It's our vision and our mission, which is super important. But without any of the other stuff, we're not going to be able to work with kids.
I mean, it took us 9 months of the stuff you're talking about until 10 months, until I was out actually seeing a client. So that's a tremendous amount of work that we had very little idea about. I think you had a little bit more exposure. I've tried to stick more to the clinical piece. But yeah, I mean, it's surprising how little you know. And then once you find out more, again, thanks to folks like you, there's many more questions that arise. I mean, so you can set up a nice construct, a nice framework, and then people have to go back in and dig in about their particular state and those particular regulations. There's always going to be something that needs to be uncovered. And, going in, not knowing what you don't know to start, again, couldn't be more grateful for the starting point that 3 Pi Squared and your content gave us.
We get that feedback a lot as far as I'm a clinician and I want to help kids.
And I don't know.
And I don't know what I don't know. And I had no idea. Like someone, an amazing, well-meaning new business owner, who I'm consulting with, coaching. I personally like to say that we call our consulting services, but I feel like I'm more like coaching and supporting rather than, I don't know, consulting feels stuffy for me, but, I'm working with her through like a lot of the overwhelm in this initial beginning part. And yeah, she shot over her handbook to me and she was like, what do you think? And it was like 3 or 4 pages and it was beautifully written.
Mhm.
It was beautiful. She had her values and her mission statement, and she had some really nice information about like her employee description, her job descriptions, and all of these pieces. And it like almost broke my heart to have to tell her that she was missing like 300 things, like not really 300, but you know, what was going to feel like 300 for her. Right. There's in these are things that when we had our company, like I didn't do this part. I had Steven. And so thankful for him and all of his knowledge, but you learned it through
Trial and error.
trial and error.
And
Yeah.
I mean, my history of, process engineering, I did not NADCAP and TS automotive audits. And so this is where I came from, is like just figuring out how you create quality management systems. But I'm just going to note that there's way too much gratitude being directed toward me, and we just need to chill it at this point.
So you bring up, Stephen, you bring up trial and error. And I think that's an interesting thing because fortunately we have cultivated a lot of good relationships in the field, and a few people that I know have started their own company. And I think the trial and error is interesting because one person I talked to said they didn't really understand insurance billing and didn't get paid at all, I think, for 5 months, and didn't get paid in the entirety of their initial billing for like 8 months. So that's an interesting thing with trial and error, because most companies can't sustain 8 months of floating salaries or even just not getting paid, even if it's just you. And then secondarily, a lot of the handbook stuff, the audit, the trial and error of failing an audit, that just seems to loom large. And then if I fail an audit, are we going to have to pay back the money that we've gotten? And then how are we going to do that? So I think coming from the clinician side of things and the initial business owner start of trial and error just seems so daunting and doesn't seem like something that we had the luxury of doing.
Yeah. I mean, we winged so much stuff when we started.
Well, and when we started, it was before the mandate, so
Right.
we got a little start like
Sure.
on our own without having to implement a lot of those rules and stuff, regulation. But it wasn't very soon.
But
like,
even insurance, like I can remember the first insurance claim that I tried. There were a few Facebook groups at that point, but there wasn't even really anybody on Facebook to say, "Oh, well, obviously you do it this way, you idiot." But like on the CMS form, it has a from and a to, right? So obviously, I would put my entire month's RBT direct service in one line. Why wouldn't I do that? It's from October 1st till October 30th. And we did, 200 hours. And like, so now not only have I waited a month to submit my claims, now I'm going to wait another 6 weeks to find out that I did it completely wrong. And so now we're 2.5 months behind, right? And so it's just, yeah, there were times, and so that's part of the reason why I started this is I saw so many amazing BCBAs out there just wanting to help and then making the exact same mistakes that I was making. And I'm like, I could watch this train wreck, or I could maybe get out and help some people avoid the crash before it happens, right? And so I had no idea that this was going to turn into this because I started with 1 or 2 people just trying to help, right? And now we have 1,600 customers, right? All over the country. It's insane to me. Our average customer has around 25 employees. So we're talking 40,000 people that we're, interacting with on a daily basis. It's insane. And I'm just honored to be a part of it. And I'm glad that people can have some amount of faith that we're doing it right. And hopefully we're helping, right?
You certainly are.
Well, thank you. There are a lot of days when I don't feel that at all. But we were talking, I don't know if you know Brian still, am I going to say his name? Silbo. I'm sorry, Bryant. I don't know how to say your last name. He created this organization called NASCN.
Naskin.
I got it right.
You got it right.
But it's a quality.
It's NASQN.
Quality assurance. He's really big on LinkedIn, and we were talking to him. great guy, and I love what he's trying to do. But that was my thing, right? Is sometimes I feel like maybe if I wasn't here, that BCBA wouldn't try to start their own company. They would continue being a BCBA. And so I struggle with that part of it quite a bit. Am I really a force for good, or am I not? I most days I struggle answering that, so.
I think that's interesting though, the BCBA versus the company ownership. We actually had a good discussion on the last podcast that we had, because I don't think company ownership is for every BCBA. And I'm sure you all see this as well. And I think in my experience, there's one of two motives, maybe one of three motives for BCBAs to want to start their own company. One is they just get their BCBA and think they know everything and think they can do it better, which I'm going to go ahead and throw that one out, but that's certainly a motive. But the other two is clinically, the companies that they've worked for, and this is ours, the companies that they've worked for just stop jiving with their clinical modalities and methodologies, and they want to be able to do something different clinically. Or number three, and this is kind of what we talked about for the last one, they somehow find out what the company's getting reimbursed for, what they're getting billed out for, versus what they're making. And I'm just going to throw out random numbers. The company's billing them out for $100 an hour. They're making $50 an hour. And they're like, oh, well, if I start my own company, I can get that other $50 an hour.
Of course.
And then miss everything with that. And how that starting your own company actually might mean that you're personally making less than that initial $50 an hour.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting, because we did it more for the methodologies piece, and hopefully the money will follow. But I think if people are doing it for the money piece, it certainly can happen. But that's at least initially, that's a struggle to make that money initially, at least in my experience.
Well, I think there's a stagnancy. It's like in our experience recently, things clinically get kind of stagnant. So you can see outfits, agencies that are doing well, seemingly fiscally, but then, the actual day to day, what they do, what their focus is, you can tell is just kind of stagnant. There's no more clinical discussion. The product isn't moving forward. It's just now all about running the business. And, again, more power to people who are successful that way. I just, as a clinician, I simply don't flourish in those environments, because it's like we're not talking about anything, and I'm okay going out and innovating on my own and trying to share those things, but it feels very stagnant. It feels very static.
You can tell, as the co-majority owner of the company, what percentage of your hours of reimbursement are direct?
Oh, I mean, right now I'm
100%, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's all we're literally paying, myself an hourly wage. And trying to work as many direct cases as possible, and then really trying to practice what we've preached here on, whether it's on our podcast or anybody else's, and trying to get a hold of that direct service again, and the vigor, the challenge, what I love to do is that direct work with the client, with the patient, with the family. So trying to get back to those basics as you also learn how to manage a successful business. I feel very fortunate in terms of, my partnership with Dan and some of our other partners, where I've been allowed to focus on the clinical piece while other people work on the back end. And that's been a really nice split. And it's been really nice to have people like Dan who understand what I'm doing out there with the client, such that we're running things administratively in a way that puts that service model first. And again, we're just figuring this out. We're 6 months, we're over a year into the project, 6 months into operations or so, nearing about 20 clients. So we're at the beginning, but we're feeling very good about always going back to the, answering the question, what is it we do here? We do medical services. We do applied behavior analysis. That's what butters the bread, if you will. And let's put that first. How can we make that the best possible? How can we make the families, the calls, the clinical service, the focus, like Dan said, in hopes that if we do that right, and we're, seemingly logical and at least basic about our operations and our actions there, it should work out okay. So we're excited about that. We're still very altruistic. We're We haven't lost a whole lot of steam. Still feeling very, very, very altruistic, I think is the best phrase.
That's excellent. I love hearing that. I mean, and that's one of the most important things that I tell ABA business owners when I'm supporting them or we both do, is like, what's your why? You have to have your why at the front. Like, I don't care if you call it goals, values, missions, whatever, but why? Why am I doing this? And so I do think that that's amazing that you're able to get that direct work and, be able to be immersed in that, and that you have a team that you each play a different role, because that's one of the things, Stephen, when you mentioned a minute ago, I was like, well, yeah, but we've had how many podcasts, and we've spoken at conferences about not starting your own business. We do everything we can to get all of the information out there, not to scare you away, but for you to get like the real picture of, hey, this isn't about making more money. This isn't about getting to do everything your way necessarily, right? Yeah. And a lot of people come to us because they left a place that they no longer felt that they were providing ethical quality services. And so they wanted to start their own company. And then they ended right back up in the place where they left. 100%. And, we've talked about this numerous times where, you do have to make sure that you approach this in a methodical way and you get that information that you need, whether you reach out to us or anyone, but like to really make sure that you have all of those processes and to know what you're even supposed to do and understand that. Like, I didn't understand when we first started that, okay, well, let's start hiring some people now. And Steven's like, yeah, well, we have to figure out workers' comp. We have to figure out payroll, taxes. And I was like, what? And so, of course, when we started out,
we put those on extinction.
I know, exactly. Right? Like, what can we, yeah.
Plan ignoring.
Yes, totally. And, it's just so many parts and pieces to it all. And I was very much like, I was giving away. I mean, I think we talked about this before, but like, I was like totally giving away free services, and it wasn't completely out of the goodness of my heart. It may have been a little avoidance, of like, well, would I rather just eat this like $20 copay? Yeah, that's probably easier than having to go to this mom who's had a hard week and ask her for this money. Well, I didn't realize at that point that you're not allowed to do that. You've signed a contract that you're going to be accepting that money. Like there's so many.
We've had to battle that
pieces
with our company.
Yeah, there's so many pieces there. And when a lot of times, and kind of to get to my point, based off of what you said, Mike, is like a lot of times BCBAs come to us and they want to start their own business. And I say, okay. And they're just themselves. They're no one else, no partner, no colleague, nothing. And I say, okay, well, how important are direct services to you? How important is it for you to know your clients, to be part of the clinical decisions, to be part of the treatment, and, that's part of it, right? Because if you want a certain percentage to be involved in the cases, and you want it to be that, and you're also saying that you're not planning on hiring any BCBAs, or maybe a couple BCBAs, like it doesn't match. It doesn't match. If you're, it's really difficult to continue the clinical work and own a company unless you do have a team to share that load.
And that's why I wanted to make sure that we shouted you out in the beginning, because I know that the farther you all don't do any direct anymore, right? Is that correct? So the farther you get away from that, sometimes it can be challenging because you're not seeing that kid say their first words or go to the bathroom and things like that, but you're helping people that help people that help people do that. So you're like 4 or 5 kind of iterations on the ladder away. And I think probably you get, and I could be wrong, please correct me if I'm wrong, but the percentage of calls that you get that's probably like, something's wrong with our website or something, this isn't working right and you're having to troubleshoot versus, hey, this really helped, and because of you, I created my own company. I'm sure you get some of that, but the farther away you get, it's just so much like I got to deal with this stuff. So I wanted to make sure that you all get some of that, because from the field, Mike's more so than I am, like it's really making a difference.
Well, thank you. Yeah, when we closed my ABA company, well, even towards the end there, like COVID was the whole end of our company is when we made that decision. But prior to that, I had made the decision that I'm going to figure out how to like step into more sessions.
Sure.
Because I was not feeling it. I was done. I was crispy burnt out. Steven had been trying to get me to close for a couple of years and like move on to something different. I didn't want to. I didn't want to close. This was my baby, right? We worked hard at it. I love my staff. I did a lot of work. And so then once we did close, and then we made our international move and we got settled here. In fact, I think I just talked about this maybe on the last podcast. But you know, I had no intentions of doing this full time, this 3 pi squared thing with Steven full time. I was done with the ABA field. I was out. I had no desire to continue. I was thinking maybe I'll do some parent coaching. Maybe I'll open a preschool. Maybe I'll just really focus into like early intervention. Maybe I'll go learn to knit. I don't know, but I really don't want to do ABA. I'm done with it. And so Steven I did need to help support him with, and he's like, hey, there's this case, there's this person, I really need your input on this. Or, you know, I jumped on just to help with the podcast. And I mean, it was fun. I enjoyed the podcast. But what happened is like over the last 2 years, especially this last year, as I've been more and more involved, I've gotten to speak to so many business owners out there. And like probably about a year ago, I guess my fire like reignited my fire. Probably it was around the same time that we all had we were at the conference together.
Same.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I was really mad because I wanted to be done. Like I had made my decision. I wanted to be done.
Yep.
I didn't want to have to like revisit this. I was even not planning on like doing CEUs. Like I was done.
Oh, wow.
And so, but the thing is, it's like all of you guys out there in this space and the ABA, not even the business leader, but BCBAs, we really got to meet so many amazing people. Techs. We did that whole like We Hate My Job series of trying to figure out how to get like help give techs the voice, right? To how can we help them, right? And just the passion in the field and so many people working together, really pushing for quality. It just reignited my fire. And so now I am like beyond hyper focused into this whole thing. We've got 50 million projects running. They're not all Steven's creative things. I'm bringing him creative things of what we can do together. And like we're trying to pace each other. But I'm so excited to be still in the field, and I'm glad I didn't leave. And it's because of the collaboration and the connection with others in the field that are like-minded, right? Like you guys. And so, and really wanting to do amazing work and really starting companies for the right reason.
Yeah. Yep. I have a couple thoughts, but let me pass it to you. I've been hiding.
I know. So you mentioned the RBT, and I'm sure we'll talk about this a lot, but that's sort of an underlying mission for Ascend is to really focus on redefining that position. I think that those are young professionals that are coming in often to their first impression in the field. I, studied psychology or behavior or something under that umbrella. I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to be able to get a decent job with this minor or this major. And now here's an opportunity that seems very important. I'm working with kids and families that need help. And then, as I've said before, all of a sudden, especially here in California, wow, my buddy that didn't get a degree works at Chick-fil-A and they're making more money than I am. And their fiscal health is more steady and better than mine. We really want to change that. We drew a lot of inspiration from, things that you did in your company in terms of taking care of those younger professionals to give them, predictable earnings, things that you could live off of. And here in San Diego, I mean, that's a tough game. I hear about what people make and what rent is. And I respect those young professionals who are out there using their own cars, driving around, oftentimes not supported enough. We hear that all the time.
From our RBT.
Yeah, we just hired our first RBT. Yay. Shout out to her out there. She's great. But that was one of the first things in her interview, right? What was the problem with your last ABA position? I never saw my supervisor.
Mm-hmm.
That's number one. So we assured her, we promised her that she would have the opposite problem at Ascend, and we've delivered on that promise. I think at this point, she sees one of us every session so far. And yes, she's flown solo a little bit here and there to finish sessions or start them, but we are accessible, and we're going to be with her, within reason for the next couple of weeks until we can all agree that, enough front loading support has been given. And then we're going to make sure that at least once a week, she sees the supervisors that are on her cases. And it starts there. Then the bigger questions are more predictable pay, making sure that it's not just about client time that can get you pay. That's going to be a factor of our ongoing fiscal growth and health. But we really want to take care of that position. There's so many gaps for these young professionals in their first experience, things that probably have contributed to given ABA somewhat of a bad name right now because it's got so much turnover, continuity of services is compromised. So I said a lot there, but the RBT, you mentioned the RBT, and I know that we're on a quest, we're on a mission to redefine that position.
Absolutely. And I there's one thing, I'm pretty hard-headed that, there's a world that for whatever reason, our company doesn't work out. I will fight my hardest to make that not happen. But what we won't do is sell out our ideals and our values to make that happen. Like, we're not going to just create the things that we've left just to skirt by. I mean, I guess I say that until we have a $50 million private equity offer, then maybe it'll change. But right now I'm sticking to my, because that just seems so ridiculous to create what you've run from. And I've seen that happen multiple times. Let me ask you all this on Mike's point with the RBT. So you mentioned, Mike, that almost every session there's been a BCB out to support. Mm-hmm. So I think this brings a larger question that I'd like you all to chime in, because you see it on more of the macro scale of insurance dictating how sessions are run. And obviously they get ideas from ABA companies because initially insurance had no idea what to do. So it's kind of cyclical. They get ideas from ABA companies. They create standards of which ABA companies now have to follow. And it seems like a lot of times there's a 20% standard. And that may or may not be able to be fighted. That's not the word fault. Yes, that would be a much better word. I'll try to use my good grammar on the podcast. Or negotiated could even be another word. What is y'all's thoughts on that in terms of these kind of standards of practice? You could even talk about it with compensation or just standards of practice in terms of fighting them, not fighting them.
I would like to hit on more of the clinical end. If you want to hit on the insurance and rate negotiation and all that stuff, that would be great. I mean, I've gotten very passionate about a lot of things, but one of the things is you have to have a plan for your techs. You have to have, if you're not going to be able to afford to train them, like Stephen was like, okay, bro, you're getting really bold here. The other day I was on a soapbox, but it was like, if you can't afford to train your techs, then you can't hire techs. You can't have a company. If you can't afford to pay your techs for training, if you're expecting to send a tech out on, they do like 2 days of onboarding, which let's face it, it's like handbooks and tax forms, and then you throw them out on their first client all by themselves. Excuse me? No, thank you.
April, they got their 40-hour online training, so they're
certified.
Okay. Well, so and then do I even start with the techs who came to us?
I'm joking.
I know you are.
I was too.
but then too, like we had so many techs that came to us and they admitted that their supervisor at their last job just signed off on it. They never had competency training, right? So then that was something that we started was competency training on the get-go across the board. I don't care who you are, how many years you have, what degree, what certification. We're testing competency from the beginning, and then we're going to fill in the gaps that are needed before you even see a client. And then once you see a client, we had a very specific titrate, like how, like you had to hit a certain level for supervision before we started decreasing supervision, and we had a whole complicated process. It wasn't complicated, honestly, but it costs a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, there were times where Steven sat down with me and he said, okay, is there a way we can do this differently? Like, this is expensive, can we cut corners anywhere? And I'm like, to what so that we can then have turnover, so that we can lose that tech and have to
turnover is expensive,
spend the money on turnover. Yeah. So it's so important. And we were coaching someone and they were struggling doing 20% across the board for all. And I get that you're saying that more than that's, that we shouldn't stop just at 20%. But for this company, they were really struggling. They were already kind of into a situation where they're maybe growing too fast, trying to figure out. And so I helped them to prioritize and navigate by like skill sets, and really looking at skill sets of the clinician or the tech, whomever was on the case, and the needs of the learner. And we like played a game of, okay, well, let's do 25 here. Let's do 10 here. Like the dance of how to make sure everyone's getting supported, looking beyond just the percentage numbers, because also like, what does your supervision look like? What is it? If you're just going in and running the session and having the tech watch you, then is that really going to give you the outcome that you're looking for? So I feel like there's so many factors other than just the percentage there. But it doesn't matter what that looks like. If you can't afford it, then you have issue. Like if you can't afford it, you can't afford it.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot. So, I mean, you could say if you have a 15-year experienced RBT, and they are being supervised by someone that just got their BCBA certification, who's training who here? So like that's one issue I think here that we maybe don't talk about enough, is that the average BCBA is 3 years experience. So I don't know if all supervision is equal, right? And so I think that, because this is something that I just assumed, and I think a lot of supervisors, especially new owners, think when I hire a BCBA, it'll be just little mini me. They're going to do everything that I do. They're going to do it exactly how I do it. They're going to be just as great at this particular skill. And then you're getting, they work with 12-year-olds and I work with 2-year-olds. How are we going to do this? Right? Like there's a lot there in itself. Insurance itself, like if you get 20%, congratulations. I think most funders are like 10%, right? And then maybe we'll give you a month, or we'll give you an hour of parent training a month if you're lucky. So like that's what a lot of people are struggling with. So they have to make a decision. Am I going to pay my bills, or am I going to do what I think is appropriate for supervision? And that is, it's horrible that anybody has to make that decision. But then it goes back to, why did you accept that contract when you had no business accepting it? Like if you're going to lose money on every case, like I'm working with someone in Texas. Again, amazing BCBA. I'll give her a 98% on BCBA. Business owner, I don't know, maybe mid 60s. Like she knows. I am subsidizing funder A with the money I make on funder B. I know I'm losing money on every case that I accept, but I'm still going to accept them, and I'm going to make it work by taking some more of these cases. So like you can't put yourself in that position. And I wish that it wasn't like that, but that's what I see across the board is well-meaning BCBAs just want to do the right thing. And, maybe their vision or their values weren't as solidified as you all, right? And they said, yeah, I'm just going to do good ABA. But then after 2 years or 3 years of getting the bare minimum of supervision, rates that just barely make it, not enough to really train my staff, knowing that I have to focus on billable hours, even though I don't want to focus on billable hours. And I'm not going to say I focus on billable hours, even though everybody knows I'm focusing on billable hours. Right. And so that just starts to take hold. And the first response out of your mouth is, what about the billable? How many cancellations do we have? What about the billable hours? Did you get all the billable hours? Did you get that auth in time? And the company just starts to hollow itself out. It loses its meaning because it's not embedded in the company. And maybe you made some bad business decisions. And I can tell you right now, I made all of those bad business decisions. And so you get into that rut, and now you're burnt out. You don't know what to do. The people that you hired that were supposed to help are more of a burden than you thought they would be. And now you're kind of stuck here. And so that I see way too often. And it was kind of that point. It's the exact same thing I left, except my name is on the door now instead of somebody else. And like, I hear that too often. Yeah.
Two questions for you, Stephen, of things that you said. So one thing that I think you kind of alluded to, April, and then you said it, Stephen, was you had to juxtapose supervision with being able to pay the bills. So is that assuming that you're now past whatever the percentage of supervision is allotted, but you feel like that's enough, so now you're having to basically do it for free? Is that kind of where that came from?
Yeah. That's what you have to make that decision, right? And I think this is, and I'm not super great on the ethics, but I believe that you're not supposed to make clinical decisions based on the funding source. So if you say, well, we have this amazing funder and they give us 20% supervision and we get 10% parent training. Oh, we're going to use all of that. But on this other funder, they only give us 5%. So we're only going to do 5%. Like, that's not what most BCBAs do. They just bill the 5% because that's all they get. It's the same with an assessment, right? Like, okay, I get 8 hours to do an assessment. I'm not doing an assessment in 8 hours. There's no way I can do that, right? And so I'm going to do the 25 hours of work because I have to, and I'll bill for the 8, right? And so that's where it's at. And so now then you have to make that decision, right? At some point as a company, are we going to let this person do the 25 hours knowing that there's a whole bunch of non-billable time where they could be doing billables? Or are we going to allow them to do what is needed and necessary? And it's very easy to just say, we'll cut it down a little bit, just a little bit. And then, and a little bit turns into 5 years later. And if we don't do it in 8 hours, we're sending it anyways, right? And then what happens? The tech who's doing all of the work has a crappy treatment plan. And now we're starting from this, right? So, it's really difficult. And it leaves me feeling a little negative.
So, one thing that I've seen from being like directly in some of the negotiations on the clinical side is, I'll leave the rates negotiation for a different discussion because I'm sure we'll talk a lot about that, but let's just talk about the clinical side of things. Is that some of these things are actually negotiable. We work with our primary funding source. If we justify why we want more supervision, so they have their standards of, I don't know, yes, for 100 hours, 100 units, whatever, of direct, they're going to give you 20% or whatever it is, 10%. But you can ask for more. So again, those things could be done on the front end. I know there was an interesting one that we fought the battle and won, but it kind of goes back to what you said earlier. In the time that we were fighting the battle, we weren't getting compensated because we kept getting denied, was the initial assessment piece.
That was tough.
And I guess there's kind of a standard, and we even consulted with you all about this. And this was so ridiculous. I probably consulted like 7 people about this. I was losing my coconuts because I guess the standard of practice right now, and with a lot of medical insurances, is you get X amount of assessment hours, but you can only do 2 hours a day for assessment, but you can do like 6 or 8 hours a day of supervision, which seems absurd because the assessment allows for non-billable time.
Yes.
So, theoretically, the way an assessment would work is that you spend some time with the family, you go back and compile the documents, all done in one day. But now what they're saying is you can only max 2 days, which really is neither here nor there to how we bill it or do it. But now that's causing the parents, if we get, say, 8 hours, now it's 4 copays instead of 2 copays, which the insurance is like, I don't care. That's their problem.
Well, that's great for them, right? They've cut down, 20-40% of the cost? Great.
Absolutely. But we fought that. We were like, this is ridiculous because I think we were getting 8 hours or 16 hours for initial 32 units. So 8 hours of initial. And we were like, this is ridiculous. 12 hours, I think one of our funding sources was giving us 12 hours. So we were like, this is 6 copays for this family. And it's also not the most efficient way of doing it. You're saying, I spend 2 hours with them, then I need to turn my brain off, restart my brain tomorrow to try to do it. Or, like some people would probably do all whatever hours at one time and then kind of fraudulently bill because we're saying we did it on a day that we actually didn't do it.
Correct.
This is ridiculous. So we actually fought it with one of our insurances. And they were like, okay, we'll give you 4 hours a day. But that was worth fighting for us. And I think there's a lot of things that could be worth fighting clinically, but it's a battle. Now, again, I want to reiterate, the whole time we fought this, we were not getting paid. We were submitted. Finally, the clinical side said, okay, we'll do the 4 hours. So we submitted the 4 hours. Sure enough, we kept getting denied because the clinical side didn't talk to the billing side.
Yep.
So then we call the billing side and they're like, we don't do that. We don't do that. So talk to the clinical side. And of course, it's not like, hey, let's just get on a group call. It's like, hey, let's email this person who's on vacation for 2 weeks because they're always on vacation for 2 weeks. And then, we're talking months and months and months that we had to front this, but it was worth it to us to try to do it for the clinical integrity of our services. Kind of a long thing saying that some things are negotiable.
But and how many, in our position, I'm not sure. I don't remember the conversation exactly why we chose to hold out, but I remember saying that, no, we're going to fight this. But in our circumstance, we could have easily just given in to make sure that we jumped into the flow of things and got our payment, right? Got our reimbursement back. But for whatever reason, we chose not to and we prevailed. But I can see anybody in that position saying, just give into it.
Yep.
In fact, we've already billed the 4. Now you're going to ask us to go back and rebill. We're kind of admitting that we did that fraudulently because we're asking us to cut 4 hours into 2 time slots. What's the truth, right? So it becomes this weird.
And then the insurance didn't even have the procedure. They were like, it's only 2 hours a day. And we're like, can you get us that procedure? And they're like, oh, it's actually not in our procedure.
Not written anywhere, right?
Yeah.
But we still got denied even though it wasn't in their procedure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think there's so many things like that, even like goals or, it's pervasive. It goes into other pieces where, you want to make sure you get the paperwork through so you can get working with the family and the client. You might compromise a lot of ongoing standard operating procedures for the future. And back to your phrasing, suddenly now the funding source is dictating your clinical practice. And, that's a tough place to be in, to say the least.
Yeah, one of the worst case scenarios I've been on a call with was, and I don't know the company name because they wouldn't tell me what their company name was, which I'm glad. But they said, look, I'm pretty confident that we're billing incorrectly. And the way that they were doing it is because they were having such a difficult time with their funders. They just stopped credentialing anybody and they were billing everybody under the one BCBA, right? And so the owner BCBA, from what I understand, I did not talk to this person. I was talking to apparently her biller and another BCBA in the company. I said, they've tried and tried. They know that this isn't right, but they're doing it anyway. And you need to leave. You just need to go as far away from this company as humanly possible. But this is what, like, the path of least resistance. If I know that I can get 25 hours without a peer to peer call, but I think that they probably should have 28. What am I going to do? Am I going to spend weeks fighting what do I need? I need 5 more goals. I don't really have time for that. I have another one I have to do. So, okay, we'll go with 25. It's fine. Or go with 24 and a half.
Well,
right?
we found that within our own
company,
clinicians.
yes.
And I remember, I can vividly remember what the outfit of the BCBA was wearing. She said, well, I said, well, tell me more about the hours, because I think it was 25, whatever the cutoff was for this kid. But I know we had just had a conversation like a month ago about how he really needs, I think we were asking for 35 or something. There was a lot of, there were just a lot of needs. We just needed more hours to clinically support him and his family. And, so she comes back in and she hands me the report or whatever. And I said, 25 hours? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I thought that you recommended more. Yeah. I just don't think I could handle another peer review. Okay, I get it. And so I talked to Steven, and we talked to our lead BCBA clinical director type role. And we sat down and we had a serious discussion of how did we get here and how do we change this moving forward? And how do we support our staff being able to make this change? Talking to having a peer-to-peer review can be really daunting, and maybe there's a skill set there that's missing or needs supporting, right? And so, how can we support our clinicians to be able to ask for what they need? And there were a couple of others in the group at the time that were like, okay, we've never, not to toot our own horn, but just to show they've never worked for the company where that would be the case, right? It would be just do what insurance says, just stay under the radar, just get it in and get it out so we can get paid.
Yeah. And another one is you go in and you ask for a certain amount of hours because you think, hey, well, with my 2 hours of assessment, I'm pretty confident, right? Right? You have no idea. And then you're like, okay, I guess they need 20. I don't know. And then you realize after working with them for a couple of months, you're like, man, I need a lot more hours.
Or less.
And then you go to the end, but everybody knows, right? You don't have to tell them. Everybody knows that if I go back to insurance and I ask for 10 more hours, forget it. They're not going to, so I'm not even going to bother, right? So even without somebody coming in and saying, hey, you have to focus on the billables. You have to get this thing done right away. You have to, we have to get therapy going. Don't worry about training. There's just that natural tendency to go towards that for whatever reason. And I'm not exactly sure why. Maybe
the matching law.
Yeah.
And I think too, there's a level of intentionality that's missing, right? And that's why we talk about focusing on the why, right? And why are you doing this? And what does that look like? What are those behaviors? Not just your values, but what are the behaviors?
Yep.
That you're, exhibiting.
So I think there's something. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, do you recommend, are you struggling with those things, or are you what? How did you go about that process of saying, no, this is worth fighting for, right? Based on our values, based on our ethic, whatever it is. How did you make that decision where, most people would have just said, whatever, we'll just do it the way they tell us to?
Mind if I speak on that one?
No, go ahead. So
I think we're kind of in a unique position. We have a few owners, 5 or 6, I think, with our company. Mike does a lot of the clinical side of things. I do more so the back end side of things. And then we have another partner who really does a lot with the insurance piece. But that individual is also a BCBA and knows the clinical side of things, and we jive with him clinically. Yeah. And I just want to say that because it's very, very easy, and you kind of alluded to it, to be on that side of things, to just say, let's push it through. When you're not, because that person's not really doing any direct hours, and we've seen it with a lot of our companies. the higher ups just push it through, just because they're not seeing it makes their life way easier. When the billers, and this was one of your biggest kind of qualms at previous companies, when the billers are now dictating the clinical services, that becomes an issue. So
I do have to say really quickly, though, that once we got into the billing side of things, I did develop a great deal of empathy for people doing that work. So as a clinician, I've gotten better about making sure my stuff is converted, and because it is, in all fairness, it's a lot of work, and I can only imagine having a workflow and then, oh, Mike didn't convert this session. Now it's throwing off my charting or whatever it is. So anyway, I had to say that.
Sure. So that's the background to your question. The short answer, and the reason that this was kind of my hill to die on, and I let the other person knows who deals with insurance that like, this is my hill to die on. I don't fight a lot of hills, but this is one of my hills to die on because it just seems so illogical to me. And I also had some direct interactions with parents, and they were asking of why we got 6 copays. They were like, you were only out here for 2 hours. Why are we getting all of these copays? Can't you compile the report after you see us? And I'm like, we certainly could. But because of the way that we're reimbursed, now we can't do it, which isn't really fair to you as the parent. So it was just like my hill to die on. I thought it was so ridiculous. Obviously the clinical side of the service delivery saw it was ridiculous as well. But I was like, yeah. And then we fortunately had the ability to, we had one of our other owners, the investor in the company, who gave us a little bit of a pot that we could sustain ourselves. But more importantly, we were able to do so because we all have second jobs. So it wasn't like, hey, we just need to get this through because we need to get paid. We were all able to sustain.
Yeah.
So again, I don't want to sound like I'm on my moral high ground here, but we were able to take some more stances that were moral because we were able to pay our bills. If we weren't able to do that, I don't know. Maybe it would have just been like, let's just push it through so we can pay our bills. So hopefully that answered your question. But it was just so absurd to me. I remember like calling Mike, calling the other individual, and then the other BCBA that we brought on who asked the question was like, wait, we can only do 2. Why? And then having to explain, literally getting red in the face trying to explain it because it just seems so absurd to me.
I think they had, in all fairness, we saw the crack in their procedure too. I think they had denied us 1 and paid us for 1 or something like that. So we had impetus to say, you know what? Nuh-uh. We're going to hold out on this because we don't like this, standard and we don't like what it's doing and we don't like the way it dictates our practice. So we just decided to fight it out, and I'm happy we did.
Yeah. That's a really great lesson too, because maybe you'll be more likely to fight it out another time if you're able to, I know it depends on so many factors.
Yeah. And I think to your point, like about the money, right? Like, and I say this as a joke when I'm talking to my free consults, but it's like most people don't have a trust fund where they can just sit around and wait for things to come in, right? So you're like working on a shoestring budget here, just trying to get this thing going. And it's like, I can see how it could be, hey, we'll just play ball, get things going. Yeah. We'll everything.
Change it later.
Yeah. We'll figure that out later. Don't worry about it. And later never comes, right? And so I think that like best intention is, hey, you know what? We're just going to do it because ultimately we're helping. And then you have that company you used to work for where they committed 25 million in fraud, right? Like, hey, we were just doing our best, right?
But I think that's what happens though for a lot of things is like that later never comes, right?
Absolutely.
And that's one thing I really try to slow down those people in their first year and help them to be more intentional because I'm like, it's like, sometimes I feel like I'm talking to a teenager. I'm like, listen to me, please. Right. Like, I promise. But it's so easy to, a lot of people are in the position where they're working at a million hours those first 2 years. They're wearing all the hats. They're doing it on their own.
Yep.
And it's easy to carry that over and not be able to delegate, not be able to take a step back because I can't, right?
Oh,
and yeah.
Can I speak to one thing that you all just said? Because I mentioned I called like 7 people that I highly respect in the field and still very much highly respect to a T. Every single one of them was just like, bill 2 hours. That's what it is.
Yep.
And then I remember talking to you, and you were getting fired up. You're like,
very fired up.
You can't tell Mike that kind of stuff because he will get super. And then
that's my hill to die on at that point. Wait, everybody else? Nope, we're not doing it.
Yeah.
And again, I think it's because we saw that variation. Wait, they paid us for this one though, so that was they clearly can do it. They're choosing not to. Right. How do we get into that? How do we justify? How do we hold out on this one, see where it takes us? So I think we were in a very fortunate position, and we understand not everybody's in that position. I think we've got a lot of things going for us, from our administrative bodies having a lot of knowledge as BCBAs already. So understanding a certain workflow that we're trying to achieve. I feel very fortunate as a clinician for some of the crazy goals I come up with, because I know that somebody's going to vouch for them, and somebody understands what I'm trying to do. But yeah, all those things are they're painstaking, and they're very nerve-wracking, and you're sitting there not getting paid. And again, we're in a very fortunate position to have had a nice little bucket to start with, good funding. We've been very frugal about it, which has played well. And so I know not everybody has those particular variables at hand and those advantages. But yeah, we feel very fortunate to have been able to fight the good fight because of the circumstance we're in. I think it starts with back to what how we started this conversation, looking at that mission, looking at your vision, looking at your handbook and your policies, and saying, hey, before we had any of these contracts and clients, before it was about money, we had these ideas. Right. This is the way we wanted to do this. Now, I'm not saying that plays out perfectly when now you're in operations and you look back. Yeah, you do have to go back and make some modifications, but I think it's important to hold on to that original vision and go, man, but we want to do it this way. I know everybody else is doing it that way. We want to do it this way. How do we get there? And yeah, sometimes you have to abandon ship. But again, I feel very fortunate that a lot of the things we set out to do, knock on wood, we're getting them done.
Well, I remember when I called you, because we had talked about it, and then I told Mike and the other, I'm going to call some people and we'll figure it out. We'll get it done, thinking that they would have strategies on how to do it. And everyone was like, just do 2 hours. So then I called Mike back, very heated. Was like, oh, so this is what we're going to do now? This is we're just going to sell out and do 2 hours. I was like, okay, well, let's is there like a middle grade? Because I was still going to fight the battle. But you had the fortune of not having to deal at all with the insurances. And I'm just like,
you don't want me with the insurances. They're going to hang up on me.
I just remember that conversation, because I was already heated, and you're like, oh, we're just going to sell out now. That's what we're going to do. And it came from that part of that, like you mentioned, April, that burnout piece of, we left the whole and I'll call it corporate ABA. We left the companies we were at to not have that stuff. And then sometimes you're hitting the face with it.
Yep.
And it's just like, oh man. And I just remember that call, and you were so heated.
No, and there's always a lot of empathy that I gained during those moments, and having complained about certain things historically as an employee, and now as an owner, having to look at that and go, oh, I see why people did that. Yeah. And okay, a lot of empathy. Maybe eat some word, take back some of the words I've said, because now I understand the situation. And then, yeah, more importantly, am I going to follow suit, or what are we in this for? And you can't win every battle, but we've been very fortunate to be able to go back to our original plan and go, no, we're going to try this out, and we're going to take some losses right now, but we're okay. Let's figure it out. And again, I think we fared pretty well. So we're not nitpicking at everything, but just back to Dan's point, we were also about to leave the field, I think. Mm-hmm. And it was like, if unless we start our own thing, there's no way we can continue an ABA. So with that, objective in mind, I think it's where we've dug our heels in sometimes and said, no, we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it this way, and you're going to work with us, and it's going to take a couple of weeks of sweating it out, and Dan sitting on the phone for 4 hours at a time. Mm-hmm. You guys know about that.
Oh, God forbid you press the wrong button. You press 3 when you're supposed to press 6, even though the person told you to press 3. But that's for behavioral health, not ABA.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh,
yeah. Though,
I like this.
Yeah, I can remember being on a call with Aetna for 6 hours.
Let's be real. So because this is when we had the clinic, right?
Yeah.
Steven's office was like once she passed through, like we had like the waiting area thing, and then there was a door, and once she passed through that, there was a conference room. Right past that was Steven's office. we made a mistake because, oh my gosh, he would lose his temper. I don't know how much you yelled at the people, but you surely yelled after you slammed the phone down after
I hope
you
there's
talked to
video
them.
because I can see it in Steven's face right now. Him just reliving
Oh, yes.
it.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
PTSD, man.
And our staff would it's like towing by his office, and they would come into they were like, especially like the new staff. I'm like, the other staff would even tell the new staff, it's insurance. Don't worry. He's a cool guy. He's not mad at you. It's just insurance. And then when when you delegated that to Gabby and she started taking it on, she was like, okay, I need to go on. I don't know what meds I need, but I can't handle this level of stress. And, but then I got my Steven back because it took a few months, but after you got her trained and then detox from those insurance calls,
it's hard.
Yeah.
I can remember I would get on the call and we'd have a bunch of denials. And they tell, I can only take care of 8. I can only take care of 8.
Oh, it was 8.
I have 9. I have 9 denials, and you're going to put me back on hold for 2 hours?
Sorry, buddy.
Come on. So,
Sorry,
it's and just, I do have a huge ask, if you don't mind, if you can share how you got that 4 hours so we can distribute it to everybody so they know how to fight for that. Because, they are literally telling you, hey, I know you're doing it in 4, but we're going to ask you to commit fraud here, and we're going to tell you because we need those copays. So you do it. You know what I mean? They're telling you to do it in more time than it actually was done in, and people are just doing that because that's right. And so inadvertently, if you get in a recoupment audit. And wait a second, you were billing assessment over here, and you were in program modification. How did that work? How are you doing 2 sessions at a time? Right? So this is a situation people find themselves in. So yeah, if you don't mind sharing how you did that, because that's one of the things we started off with that we love the collaboration, and so if we can kind of outsource knowledge and give it to everybody, distribute it to everybody. It's great to.
Well, and one of our, I'm trying to get someone to do a course on this within our platform or CEU platform, but, is even the skill of how to back up what you want, right? Like how to, medical necessity, yes, but even just how to make these. I think that's part of it. I think there's multiple skills here. And part of it is how to negotiate, but how to, what's the word I'm looking for? Justify, justification, how to write that justification, how to say, this is what this client needs and here is why. And linking it back to medical necessity. And then how do I, okay, now let's go. How do I negotiate that? Knowing that, of course, maybe you have to choose. You can't always, depending on how long it takes and everything. But I think even just getting those beginning skills of being able to know how to justify these things, because sometimes people don't really know how to justify it or even know that it's something that they even could ask for.
Right.
Certainly. I would love to answer both of those 2 questions. Can we do the pod swap and answer them?
Let's do it. I think that's a great
Tune
timing.
In to ABA on Tap podcast for the answer to this question. We'll see you all there.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Well, to our ABA business leaders, listeners, thank you so much. We know that you have a very busy schedule, and we really appreciate taking time hanging out with us. And to Dan and Mike, we love that you are here today, and I just love this discussion, and I'm so excited that it's not done. So we'll see you on ABA on Tap.
Thank you so much for having us on again. Thank you.
We'll see you on the other treats.
All right. See ya. Thank you for listening to our podcast. Hopefully it was helpful. If you would like to gain access to this entire video and actually our entire library of videos, please join our ABA Business Leaders membership. You can find that at www.3pisquare.com.